Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by David Shearer. He is the VP of Marketing at Looker. David, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, David. We're going to be talking about 4 keys to developing a killer customer experience today. Before we jump straight into that, I would love for you to give people a little bit of background on yourself. You've been at some notable names in the tech space in various marketing roles. So if you could touch on that real quick, and then also give us a taste of what you and the team at Looker are up to these days.
Absolutely, yeah. So my career started in the advertising and brand building agency world back in the UK. I'm British by birth and did a number of years in the UK with big blue chip companies before bringing that out to California and built several agencies in California and San Francisco before stepping into the tech space. My first tech experience was at Box long before its IPO, and helped bring that one to market, and then have since Box done a number of other great companies. One of those was a company called Kesbury, which is an autonomous drone and data platform. And then most recently have been really enjoying my time at Looker, which is a data science company in another high growth environment. Looker as a business is a data platform that's shaping the next generation of how we use and draw insight from the massive amount of data and intelligence available in our businesses today. The company is based in Santa Cruz, but has offices across North America and Europe, and is now in Japan as well. And the company is generally on a mission to empower people to achieve more in both their day-to-day business as well as the progress in the innovations and new discoveries they're driving through the smarter use of data.
Awesome. Very exciting stuff. So, I mean, David, you mentioned being at Box in the early days, being at a company who sounds like they were a bit ahead of the wave on autonomous drones. Obviously, data and analytics are very hot right now, and I think we're just scratching the surface of where all of that technology can go. And so one of the challenges that I think a lot of marketers face, especially who, like you, have been part of or leading a marketing team in a fast growth environment, is that things are changing quickly, and it can be very tough to craft a customer experience when there are so many moving pieces and things changing rapidly. So I think with that perspective in mind, I'd love to jump into your keys here of crafting a killer customer experience. And one of those things I think that we can touch on from your experience in previous roles is, building the brand in the early days, and some of those things that you found to be effective as you kind of lay the groundwork to building eventually what you want to see in that customer experience. Not that it's ever done, but there are some specific things in those early days, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. Speaking from my own experience, which has mostly been in SaaS and technologies, the truth is, they're subscription model businesses, and that drives a slightly different kind of experience you would have when you've got a product where, you buy the product and, you bought it, it's yours, good luck with that. The nature of subscription companies is that the customer can walk away at any time. And so you have to be very ready to sustain that relationship on a day-to-day basis indefinitely. And in terms of when you're thinking about that from how you manage your brand, as a company, there's a tipping point in that business model where you have a point where more of your customers or more of your audience are existing customers, and your revenue is coming from that existing base rather than the new acquisitions that you're going to make, which is more typical for a technology company. So in the early days of when you're trying to build that brand and that reputation, and you don't have the dollars to be able to do the big media, be able to place billboards and that kind of thing, being able to focus on the base that you have and look at them as your brand guardians is a different way to think about brand building. And actually, I think it's a pretty smart way to think about brand building for a subscription-based model. And then focus your energy around how you create killer experiences for your existing customers so that they become successful very quickly. They feed the engine of great stories that bring in new people, and you give those people a reason to want to go and tell their friends and colleagues and peers about their great experiences. And that starts that flywheel engine momentum, and you're curating what your real brand experience is without having to go to the big dollar items that typically people go to for brand building around billboards and TV and print and all those much more expensive things. So it's just, if you think of customer experience as a way of building brand and identity, it's a cheaper way to get to those very strong personalities and personas that great companies have, rather than throwing money at billboards and large-scale media. And that's particularly true when it's a smaller business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I hear you saying there, David, is, once you get those early adopters, don't abandon them to quickly try and reach for, that early majority. Instead of, focusing on your next reach, focus on really resonating with those early adopters. Reward them for being early adopters, because it's going to do two things. It's going to give you that momentum where they start talking and reaching those people who are in the early majority, that next wave of adoption, but it starts the wheels turning towards investing in the customer experience, which is exactly what we're talking about today. So I think those are two very practical things for folks to think about in the early stages of their brand. The next thing I know you wanted to talk about, David, is this relationship between hearts and minds, and I hear this from our friend Sangram Vajre over at Terminus all the time. He talks about it's not B2B or B2C, it's H to H. It's human to human. We need to think about, especially in B2B, that we're still trying to reach people and connect with them on a personal level. What can you speak to in your experience there that you think other B2B marketers should be thinking about when it comes to building the brand in the early days and having that influence the customer experience that they're trying to build within their brand?
Yeah, I think it's a great area. When you're a more established business, when we look at the companies everybody's heard of, the Apples and the Googles or the IBMs or the people, the companies who have been around a long time has allowed them to build a reputation, and the scale of their presence has allowed them to be very familiar with their audience. And that's not so easy when you're particularly a young company. You're still trying to build your reputation. You don't have a legacy to draw on. So one of the most important things I've always felt for a company in that stage is to build trust, because trust is the foundation of any great brand. I mean, if you think about what a brand really is, it is that confidence and trust that where you see that logo mark, that graphic or that symbol, that emblem, it means something, and you have a conviction about what will happen next. You have a comfort that when they say they will do something, they will be there and they will support you. So paying attention to how people get over the humps of progression, either in their day job or in learning your product or solution, makes a difference. Because on that point around, human to human, everybody has got a boss. There's always somebody they need to be impressing or keep on top of the stuff for. They need to be hitting their goals. They've got other people in their organization that are depending on them. They've probably got customers of their own that they're working with you in order to be able to support. Those are very real and emotional things for people to have to deal with. And so they're coming to you for help in solving those problems. And a great example of something that we've done at Looker to try and make sure that, as people are going through that curve, and, there are always, with anything that people are learning that is new, there's a new software, there's a new skill or growth in their career, in their life. There are going to be moments where it gets a little lumpy, as I say, where they have a problem or they have a challenge and they need some help. So we have a thing at Looker called the Department of Customer Love, run by a fantastic woman called Margaret Rosa, and it's fondly named DCL. And the Department of Customer Love is one of the things they do is provide chat support to the customer base with an average of under 30 seconds response time. And there's somebody there who can help people who are using Looker if they've come up against a problem. It's usually the more technically minded people that they're talking to, and they help them, they walk them through their issues, they help them solve the problem. They can go back into their organization with greater confidence. And that experience of knowing that Looker is going to be dependable, is going to be there for them, and they're not going to sell them something and walk away, really engenders a great deal of trust and support. And it really builds that relationship. And it's a simple thing like just executing chat support really well and focusing on making sure those problems are answered quickly and well with real human attention in that moment of need. That really shapes people's experiences, because it's in the dark moments when things aren't going well that you get the measure of the company or the person. If the sun is shining and everything's fine, that's all great. But it's those dark moments where things aren't going quite as you would hope, where people come through for you, or companies or brands come through for you, that really earns you a place in their hearts. It gives them the material to tell stories to their friends, to their peers, that then become the extension and the evangelism of your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just a few episodes ago, we had Jonathan Bolton, who is the VP of operations at BombBomb out here in my neck of the woods in Colorado. And he was talking about the impact of video had on their customer success. Their call to resolution productivity went up something like 80%. And it spoke to the power of, they went to the level of putting video in the hands of their customer success reps to put a face with the name and put that touch to that interaction of customer success and customer support. And I think that ties in really nicely with what you're saying here is there is prime opportunity for an emotional moment to happen, either positive or negative, in those customer success, customer support instances. And I love that you guys have taken, customer support, customer success. Now we're just going to go straight to customer love. I love the way that you guys term that over at Looker. That is phenomenal, David. So tell me next about the role of company culture. I think it's a nice segue there as you talk about building evangelism, building those emotional connections with your customers. Where do you see the role of internal company culture influencing customer experience on the outside?
Yes, it is a very neat segue, I think, because that Department of Customer Love, it was named by Margaret when she took over that team, and it was a very deliberate move. It's part of her personality and her style as well. She's a very warm and fun person, but building it into the title of the department, and actually taking care over the name of the team and what people understand that they're coming into really helps shape the attitude and the frame of reference with which they come at their job. So if you work in the department of customer love, you're really not under any illusions about what your function is. I mean, it's to show love to the customers and value and appreciate the people that are getting value from your product or your service. So I think there's a lesson there, I think, in thinking beyond just generic departmental titles where appropriate for how it shapes attitude. But in high growth environments particularly, one of the secrets that I've found, it's a very simple thing for customer experience, is you have to start with the employees first. The employees have to be happy. They have to be enjoying their work. You have to be spending the energy on the internal culture to create an environment where people are feeling positive and motivated, and you're hiring carefully to find those people that, for want of a better phrase, have a soul and are caring and thoughtful about people in the world. It's just a little bit of care in that process, because that plays out in those customer experiences. It's, you can't script a lot of what happens when a customer is having a problem. So having people who are genuinely thoughtful and caring and really want to do the right thing by the customer makes a very big difference. And you have to pay attention to sustaining that. If you're in a very high growth environment, when I was at Box, it was extremely high growth. I was in the early 400s of the employee base, and it was over 1,600 people inside 3 years. Looker is on a similar tear in terms of the growth that we're seeing, and it's difficult where you've got a situation where there are more people at the company who spent less than a year at the company than have spent more than a year. That really has an impact and a relationship to how you shape culture at the company. So you have to pay huge attention to it. And then that will play out in those customer conversations. And you have things like the Department of Customer Love. Particularly at Looker, we take that very seriously. We have one of our values is around love, Looker, love, which in large means show appreciation and value the love that our customers have and pay it back. And then it expands from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no hiding from the fact that internal company culture is going to affect external customer experiences. And I think you lay out some very practical reasons in previous roles and how you guys are handling that dynamic at Looker to David. So the last step we wanted to touch in crafting killer customer experiences is recognizing the expectations that are set for all of us, because we have expectations that have been developed based on our consumer interaction we're having these days. We need to recognize the implications of that on the B2B journey as well, right?
Absolutely. And I one of the things that I realized very early on, particularly on my corporate side experience, and I probably learned it in the agency world. In the agency world, one of the good things that happens in that environment is you get exposed to a lot of different brands and different companies at a scale that you just don't typically see in the corporate world. So one of my advantages has been my ability to be able to draw on those experiences from a very broad spectrum and bring them to the companies I'm part of. I love the people that come up through corporate channels. Work with a smaller number of brands during the course of their career, and so it's not as easy to see sometimes, and it's not as visible if you haven't had that range of exposure. But one of the truths I found is that the gap in expectation between our private lives, our consumer experiences, and our professional experiences are growing ever smaller. Just because you're working for a B2B company, there shouldn't be any expectation that it's a less emotional experience, it's a less human experience. Companies like Uber and Lyft have changed our expectation on the amount of time it takes for things to happen. So if you think about, when you used to call a taxi years ago, you wouldn't know when it was going to show up. And now, because of the companies like Uber and Lyft in that space, they've changed that. We have an expectation of having feedback in very real time. Even when you're buying a house, you can get a credit check and a mortgage confirmed while you're still looking at the house.
Yeah.
There's great companies. Rocket Mortgage, I think, is a great company doing a lot of good work there. Customer experience is not something that you can separate out into a separate experience from your day-to-day lives. And I think you have to bear that in mind in your expectations around what the bar is or what the standard is. There shouldn't be a drop in standard just because it's a B2B environment. I think the other thing that matters is the speed of education around your product. In a world where technology is getting more sophisticated and more advanced and there's more things to know, people don't like, we go back to what we were saying before about having bosses and peers and friends. People don't like being in a position where they don't feel confident that they have knowledge, that they understand your product. And there is a moment right after they've signed on the dotted line, and they've, particularly for software, they've taken ownership of this, and they have a huge gap in the knowledge, and then all of their colleagues share that gap. So paying a lot of attention to how you go about educating people and bringing their knowledge up is a really important part of customer experience. And thinking beyond the convention, what we typically do in customer experience learning is to have a very simple structure of, I'm going to show you the product, I'm going to walk you through it, and then you're going to go do your thing. But if you take lessons learned in different environments, one of the examples, a couple of examples I use, if you're unfortunate enough to lose a limb and you were to have to learn to walk again, there's technique that people in that industry use to help people learn a new skill that they haven't had to learn before because they have a different set of limbs to work with. There's learnings in how we go about teaching people in that environment. If we look at sports training, we can learn things from there, from teaching young children, even if you're teaching adults. There's things that we can learn there. How does NASA teach astronauts to live in environments that are very unfamiliar? Get out of our own swim lane of B2B thinking and think more broadly about what it means as a human being to be engaged and drawn into an experience. And then another great example of that, if you think back to airline travel prior to the days of Virgin Atlantic, and we've all been on the plane when the safety announcement comes on, and it's some very smart looking gentleman or lady in an aviator suit or something, or pilot's outfit, giving you notices around security and airline regulations. And nobody ever really paid attention to that detail of the customer experience. And then a company like Virgin comes along and they set a new generation of thinking around what that means and made what are essentially safety videos fun and entertaining and an extension of the brand experience for their customer base and something that the people actually look forward to. That's one small example, but if you take that style of thinking and say every small touch that a customer goes through, it doesn't have to always be utilitarian. It can be delightful. Even the most boring thing like airline safety regulations has proven that that's possible. So think about that in every touch a customer has with your company, and it will change how you think about what you're trying to teach, how people can learn, and it puts more focus on the human and less on the business transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I can attest to that. Being on a Southwest flight, talking about, Virgin Airlines, their approach to the safety videos, Southwest's approach to the safety announcement is somewhat similar. And I sat down in my seat and remembered, oh yeah, hey, I'm on a Southwest flight. At least I'll get a laugh out of the safety announcement this time. So it's regular things that we all realize in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, it makes you look forward to it. It makes you want to lean into the experience and the brand. And
Absolutely. Well, David, this has been a great conversation. I love the perspective that you bring, having been a member of teams and leading marketing teams at some high growth companies. A lot of our listeners in that same space. So love what you shared today. If anybody listening to this would like to reach out, ask any follow-up questions, or maybe just stay connected with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, and my Twitter handle is at Mr. Shearer. That's SHEARER on Twitter, and then you'll find me easily on LinkedIn as well. I'm always interested to talk to people about customer experiences and technology that makes people's lives better. So yeah, please hit me up. I'd love to chat.
Awesome. Well, David, thanks again for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
No, it's all. It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know, all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.